Hello, everyone. Welcome to our second edition of a sex discussion. I am so happy to be joined by my friend, Dr. Chris Wilson, PhD. He is a doctor of human sexuality, certified sex therapist, and licensed psychotherapist. Chris, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me again.
Absolutely, absolutely. Last time you joined me, this was probably one of our most popular Facebook Lives that we've ever done. And I guess it's not hard to understand why. Sex is something as gay men that we talk a lot about. It's something that we think a lot about because we are men. And yeah, so I'm really excited to join you today in really discussing what's important when it comes to a great gay sex life and debunk some of the myths that sex is only about physical attraction. And also be discussing how, believe it or not, guys, you can have the best sex of your life right now during physical distancing.
Definitely.
So, yes. So lots to cover. I also have a lot of questions that you guys have asked that I'm going to try to get to as many as possible from our guest expert today. So, Chris, anything you'd like to say about yourself?
I think just that, if I talk about sexuality, it's one of the things that's so pervasive in our society, but yet we don't really talk about it directly, which I think is so interesting. And in some ways, gay men are probably more direct about it than many other groups, whether it's like straight men, straight women, gay women. But at the same time, we don't talk about it usually in very healthy ways. We talk about it really ways that are very damaging to ourselves. Yeah. So it's really cool to kind of be able to talk about how we can kind of rework our thought and rework the way we're thinking about these things to help us have better communication with people we are going to have sex with.
Absolutely. I'm so glad you brought that up, Chris, because it really does. The narrative that we all may not even knowingly, project when we're talking about sex, it's typically, I would say 99% of the time about, someone's sexual attractiveness, physical stuff, whether it's a big dick or a big butt or whatever are the things that we see in relation to the porn that we all have watched at one point or another, some more than others. Nothing wrong with that, by the way.
But great, healthy.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think a lot of times we get, really can be really consumed by the idea that that's what sex between two men is supposed to be. And if we don't fit that mold or that category, then we missed the bus. And so,
yeah, we talked earlier, you and I were just talking, and the reality is that people think that you have to be this uber god to be considered attractive in the gay community. And attraction really is so subjective. Like what one person finds attractive, another person is not going to find attractive. And it's so interesting that guys oftentimes get so locked into this idea of like, I have to be this Greek Adonis to be liked and loved in the gay community. Right. And part of that, even doing my dissertation research was really around gay male body image. And so many men in the research studies I looked at talked about how like there's this constant barrage of media images that projected at us through gay media, and that they get into this locked idea of what that needs to be. So even if they themselves wouldn't necessarily think that that's what they really want to be for themselves, they feel this pressure to have that. And so they also project that pressure onto other men as well. Like, I should want this, and therefore you should want this, and we should all want the same thing. And it's like, no, some people don't want the person with the 10-inch dick. They want the person with the 3-inch dick, and that's totally cool. Right. Some people like hairy men, some people like smooth men. Some like it varies so much, and so even that physical attraction variance, we need to acknowledge that, and then to go further than that is really acknowledging that like so much of what makes a good partnership or even a good sexual connection doesn't necessarily propagate just based off of physical attraction.
Right.
There is so much more to it than that, like how we feel intellectually connected to someone, how we feel emotionally connected to somebody. And then there's the physical attraction. So those three things are really important, but they kind of have to go together to really feel a sense of like, oh, this is a good sexual experience. And sometimes we can have a great sexual experience with somebody who we're not as physically attracted to. We can have a great sexual experience with somebody who we wouldn't want to talk to on the street. And we can have a really horrible sexual experience with someone who we conceptualize as intellectually and emotionally the greatest connection we've had.
Right.
All those things can exist,
right.
Really.
I'm so glad you brought that up. There's so many variables, but I believe that when we think about sex for the most part as a whole, generalizing, or when we're talking about sex, it's so unproportionally lopsided with the focus on the physical. It's because it's just what we're, what we see, and it's what we're just bombarded with. But yeah, and so much is there's just so much more to it. Just like you said, whether it's sexual performance, sexual attraction, sexual pleasure, all of those things, like there has to be so much more to it. And there is. I mean, there, you know, your thought process, your thinking, your belief system has so much to do with all aspects of sex. And I think the belief system can be one of the biggest causes of self-sabotaging behavior when it does come to sex. Because just like you were saying, Chris, like we project what we desire, what we believe, as what everybody else wants. And so I work with a lot of gay men who are, you know, in their 50s, 60s, and, you know, and they have this idea that they've kind of missed the bus. A lot of them, not all, tend to be attracted to younger guys. So they think, well, I wouldn't want to fuck myself, so nobody wants to fuck me.
Yeah, and I work with that population as well, and I find that a lot of times they get stuck a little bit in the I need to only be attracted to young people because that's what the world media told me I'm supposed to be attracted to, and they sometimes forget to look for the guys who are in their 40s, 50s, and 60s that might be really good quality partnerships for them, and forget to think, oh, actually, if I look for somebody who's around my age group and they might look for me as well, that might be a great connection. And there's nothing wrong with when someone gets in a partnership with someone who's got 10, 15, 20, 30 years age gap. That can work just fine and be a beautiful connection, but it can also sometimes end up being detrimental because you're in different stations of life. And so we have to recognize that, like, we can have a lot of variations in those connections, and that what we find to be psychologically and emotionally connected is probably going to drive us long term, more so than that immediate physical, visceral attraction.
Absolutely. And that's what I tell all the guys in the Gay Man Thriving Academy is that, you know, yeah, physical attraction is there. It's a factor. Like, it's what we first notice about somebody. It's the first thing. We can't, you know, determine anything else. But, you know, we've all had dates with guys that we were really physically attracted to, but there was no chemistry, or we couldn't wait to get out of that situation. And, you know, it's the energy, it's the chemistry that makes people want to continue to be around you. We, you know, really,
and that chemistry can look like a lot of different things. It can look like a psychological, like, oh my gosh, I'm so excited to talk about this to this person about XYZ topic, or I'm so excited to like see them again at the end of the day and just get like a hug from them, and I'm so excited to just talk about my day. Like, that level of attraction is one level of attraction, and then there's the level of like just, ooh, I really want to see you naked. Those two things are different, and they sometimes coincide, but they sometimes don't. And what we do know, just from a scientific standpoint, that for men, as we age, those physical cues, they need to look at a certain way, this beauty standard, tends to wane over time, and we start finding ourselves being more psychologically aroused, intellectually aroused, emotionally aroused. And those things actually are bigger drivers for us as we get into our 40s, our 50s, our 60s. For some men, even as early in our 30s. And so we have to kind of pay attention to that and recognize, like, that template of like what I'm supposed to be aroused by is really based on this idea of a young sense of attraction as opposed to an older sense of attraction, and that we don't pay enough attention to older people, 50, etc., considered oftentimes older people, but older folks having sex. Like, we don't give enough attention to that. Right. And the reality is, when you start surveying guys around that, a lot of them will say, like, yeah, the physical attraction is interesting and it's important, but it's not nearly as important as these other aspects of my sense of connecting with a partner.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We can be so limited by our judgments of what we think we're supposed to be attracted to, because that's what we see as presented as what everyone's supposed to be attracted to. And it's just so distorted because, there's so much more to sexual attraction than just the physical. And that's where I think a lot of the guys that think I have to date someone younger, you know, is based on like the judgments that they want to be seen with. They want to, you know, somebody to see them with someone younger. And there's so many different factors. But I know before we were, you know, before we went live, we were talking a lot about, you know, the differences in, you know, physiological sexual desire versus physical arousal. And I'd like to explore that. I know we're already talking about it some, but from like, you know, from a physical versus energetic standpoint, I'd like to.
So like physical arousal is literally just your body's physical sense of, oh, I'm excited right now. Ultimately, when we get down to the really nuts and bolts of it, when we talk about physical arousal for men, or I should say people with penises, the reality is that is literally just the body putting blood into the penis and keeping it there.
Yeah.
And I mean, there are other things. Our lips get flushed, our nipples get engorged. Like there are other aspects, but when we talk about like from a functional standpoint. And the reality is sometimes we can be extremely psychologically aroused. We can be extremely emotionally aroused, and our body doesn't go into a physical arousal state. And it's really important to recognize that those two things are not always connected, and that sometimes it takes a lot more effort on the part of either the person who's just having their own solo session or having a session with a partner to get physically aroused. And like it might mean that instead of starting with an immediate erection, like you might have done when you were 15, 16, you might actually have to work to get the erection, meaning you might have to masturbate yourself, or your significant other might masturbate you, or they might give you oral sex to the point from where you go from soft to an erect state. And also recognize that like the visual cue that you used to be reliant on as the indicator for wanting to be aroused or having a sense of arousal might not necessarily be there or be as important anymore. And it might be more that like you get emotionally connected with somebody, and that's the point in which you're like, oh, actually I can have sex with this person. My body's responding to it. We were also talking a lot about like the psychological aspect of anxiety and how anxiety so often trumps physical arousal. And I think I said to you right before we jumped on, like our cognitive process in some ways actually trumps our physiological to some extent, not entirely. But the reality is that like if we're in a state of constant rumination around like either being able to get an erection, keep an erection, be able to penetrate a partner, these things are going to get in our way of like being able to get an erection or be able to have an orgasm. And until we learn to kind of calm down that anxiety process, we're probably going to continue into a rumination process over and over again that's going to stop us from being able to get the erection that we want. And it's also important to recognize, like, and I think I touched on this a little bit earlier, like you can like take a Viagra or Cialis, and that might help assist with the biological component. But if you're already struggling with that anxiety and that anxiety is so pervasive, that's likely going to trump any of the biological agent that would just put into your body through Viagra or Cialis.
Absolutely.
So it's important to recognize that.
Yeah, and then losing the erection can often cause more stress, and so so it's just this whole like vicious cycle. And you think you're like in the moment, like most men are thinking, "There's something wrong with my body. There's something wrong with my dick. My fucking dick is broke." But you having those thoughts, those panic thoughts, that's what's actually behind it. And I think that's where a lot of the the problem comes from. And so many guys think, my body's broken, my dick is broken. But in reality, it's the thought process. I mean, I've talked about this last time, but I mean, we have a client who just turned 75. He thought that, that part of his life was over. He was taking, pills for support with erection quality, and actually started doing some work on himself as far in the coaching academy, actually, to, really build his confidence, really build his self-esteem, to know he has value and worth much beyond what's on the outside. And started waking up with boners, started having and today has no need for Cialis or Viagra because everything is working properly, because his mental state isn't causing stress, isn't causing that negative self-talk that can absolutely be a boner killer.
Yeah. And I don't want the viewers to take away that like there aren't biological things that sometimes just get in the way. Of course there are. Like there are some people who they have erectile difficulties and it truly is just a biological issue. Like they have low testosterone, the pituitary gland not working correctly. Like there are a lot of different variables there that can, like they're on a antidepressant, which is throwing things off. Like there are definitely things that can be a biological component.
Yes. But
most oftentimes it is a biological, psychological combination. It's usually not just biological. And even when it is biopsycho combined, a lot of times it's more on the psychological aspect of things than it is the bio aspect of things. Even just having like sometimes we've seen in one study, they looked at like the correlation of men going on a testosterone treatment and how that impacted their depression and how that impacted their erectile ability. So like, and what they noted is that like, oh, when you start taking testosterone, you feel better about yourself. You start feeling that sense of confidence. You start feeling that sense of your mood's elevated better. That's going to promote better erectile functioning. And yeah, it might be partially connected to the testosterone because that's predominant hormone. Yeah. But it's also psychologically connected to the fact that we have a general sense of well-being that's heightened. And that makes us feel like, oh yeah, I can actually get erections. I can feel like I can perform. I have increased confidence. And so much, unfortunately, so much of our confidence system for men oftentimes is about their penis, whether it's the size factor or the look factor or the ability to get an erection, maintain an erection, etc. I think there was somebody who had asked on the messages when you posted the announcement video, like about like losing their erection as they're about to penetrate a partner, and like that could be a lot of things. That could be a like psychological block of like, ooh, am I even going to like this? It could be a psychological block. Am I going to be good at sex? Is this partner going to appreciate this experience? Am I going to be big enough? Am I going to be too big? Like those kind of things can be all psychological driven factors that will decrease erectile functioning and decrease our sense of sex. And I think it's really important to kind of recognize like, just because you lose an erection, like the sex doesn't have to stop. Like sex can be so much more expansive than just penis, anus, or if we're talking about heterosexual folks, penis, vagina. Like it's so important to recognize like there's so much more to sex than just intercourse. And one study I read at like one point indicated like the vast majority of men who are in long-term partnerships aren't engaging in anal intercourse very often. The reality is that, let's be real, it takes more time, it's more prep work. A lot of times it's like, okay, if I can masturbate with you or I can engage in frottage, like, you know, old school heavy petting, like grinding your pelvis together, or gripping genitals together, like that's going to be enough for me. I don't need to go into penetrative sex. And in fact, there's an entire grouping of populations, what Joe Port, who's another psychologist, has coined sides. These are people who simply don't like engaging in anal sex at all. And I think a lot of men don't even recognize like there's a term for this, let alone that they can identify this and that they don't have to engage in anal sex if they don't want to, and they don't have to assume that everybody wants to engage in anal sex. We so oftentimes see when people are on the apps and things like that, or back in the day when you were on gay.com, like 20 years ago, like that, you know, top bottom is like one of the first things people like look towards in a profile. Like size is not even an option, or I don't enjoy anal sex isn't an option, like unless you put it in your profile information. Like, so people get locked into this idea that anal sex is so important, and it's like, no, you can actually enjoy a really fulfilling sex life that has absolutely nothing to do with anal intercourse.
Right. And one thing I want, you know, everybody watching to take away is that, gay sex is not just like one certain way in one little box. There's so many variations of what, you know, can be, you know, sexual intercourse for you. And boners aren't required. You know, anal penetration is not required. There's so many different things that you can do and experience and explore. I want to back up a bit and talk about something that I think is really interesting, and also that I really want to highlight, which is I believe you call them emotional or physiological blocks. I think you said emotional blocks.
Psychological or emotional blocks.
Psychological or emotional, yeah. And just the work I do, we call them energy blocks, basically. Yeah. And but it's the same thing. It's your thought process. And just like you were saying, like I think a lot of guys self-sabotage in major ways because they're afraid that because they don't like what they see in the mirror naked, whether it's their dick size or their body type, you know, and they're comparing themselves to how they were in their teens or 20s, and they think they're supposed to be like that still, and that because they, you know, have these negative views of themselves, they don't want, you know, to let things progress to a sexual place. So I see very often, you know, gay men self-sabotaging because they don't want to experience what they believe will be shame or judgment or embarrassment, you know, when somebody does see them naked. And also that whole thought process has such a factor when it comes to sexual performance, sexual pleasure, sexual arousal, because just like you said, you know, there's a lot of different factors, but just like you said, you know, our thought process really does override biology a lot of the time. And when we have these negative beliefs about ourselves, I mean, we're really sabotaging the potential of that level of intimacy. And I'd like to ask you, Chris, what would you say are some of the biggest ways gay men self-sabotage when it comes to sex and intimacy, even love?
Yeah, I think one, just focusing on that physical attraction piece is a huge part of it. I think if we stop and actually think like, oh, what else attracts me about this person, we would probably actually find ourselves finding a lot of other variables in there. Like scent is a huge thing for a lot of people, like whether that's a clean scent or a musky scent, like that can be a variable that's really important. I think gay men oftentimes get into this idea of, you know, if I'm looking for a long-term partner, I should put everything out there. So I'm open to sex buddies, I'm open to friendships, I'm open to a long-term partner. Like if you're really looking for a long-term partner, put that out there. Really kind of focus on what you're actually wanting rather than trying to like do the entire buffet.
Right.
Focus on the one dish that you really want. In terms of other things that self-sabotage, I think the negative self-talk is such a huge thing in general. Like, in fact, there was one study I read where it talked about how like gay men just talk so negatively about their own bodies, and like men in general don't, like men in general in the sense of straight men in general don't do that in general. Like, I think we're seeing more and more of it. There's more and more articles that are showing that straight men are talking negatively about their body in ways that they've never done before and are more body critical. Right. But I think that piece of it is so important in the sense of like, oh, well, if I'm not like Chris Hemsworth, for instance, no one's going to find me attractive.
Right.
And I think we're also working against like a media piece of it all too, which is that we start sabotaging ourselves by like saying, oh, well, I need to fit to this media standard that's out there that says, whether that's porn or The Advocate or DNA magazine or whatever. I know magazines are starting to get outdated, but any of those things, and a Christian advertisement.
Right.
Like, and the reality is, like, if we are constantly viewing ourselves through that lens, the vast majority of people don't have those kind of bodies.
Right.
It's going to be really next to impossible to kind of like think that you can be aroused by somebody who doesn't fit that template. Right. Or that you will be arousing to somebody that doesn't fit that template.
Right.
So I think if we continue to have that negative narrative, that's going to be a huge self-sabotaging.
It's all rooted in that comparing ourselves to other people, comparing ourselves to what we were in our 20s and what our boners were like in our 20s or teens. I was a walking erection when I was a teenager. I could never put it away or stop playing with it. But things are different now. But I one of our coaching academy students, Ross, just commented, I'd love to see what you think. It's really completely what we're talking about. Just that sounds like my problem. I hate the way I look. I can't shut my mind off when I'm with someone. No erection, complete embarrassment. What would you say to Ross?
I think part of it is going to be for us is really recognizing, like, if someone's chosen to be with you, it's because they find you attractive in some way, and whether that's physical, psychological, emotional, whatever the attraction is, they're coming with you. Pun intended there. Because they want to, because they enjoy you and they want to have sex with you in some respect. I think it's also remembering that everybody's sense of attraction is so different. What you might find attractive, I might not find attractive, and what I find attractive is different than what my husband finds attractive, and all those things are really, really important to kind of recognize. Like, there's so much variance. I think I mentioned this. I mentioned it before we got on, and as well as I think last time a little bit too, which is like I was always really self-conscious of my ears and my nose, and like they're really large for the rest of my face. And the reality is that like my husband finds those two things really, really attractive. Yeah. Like, it even as like it's not just him blowing smoke on my ass, because when I see him looking at another guy, like he saying that he notices are the ears and the nose. So like that's an important thing to kind of recognize. Like, okay, there's something to that. And we can also find like parts, like even if we're looking at just the physical for a minute, like we can also find that some people are like, oh, I might not like everything about this person physically, but you might be able to find certain aspects of their appearance really attractive. And that might be enough for you in terms of the physical arousal. Likewise, someone might be with you and they might not necessarily say like everything about you is their number 10 like category of like, ooh, you're perfect. But they might really love your eyes, or they might really love your chest, or they might really love your, whatever. And that might be the physical piece for them. And that might be enough for them.
Yeah, I agree completely. I mean, I think, and I tell this to my students, like, you are exactly as you are, inside and out, the perfect match for somebody out there. But when you let your beliefs that you don't fit that mold of that porn star block you, you're never going to allow yourself to get out there and find that person. But guys are attracted to guys that, have extra weight. Guys are attracted to guys that are bald. Guys are attracted to guys of all shapes and sizes and everything in between. And it's just a matter of, overcoming those beliefs. And I'd like to ask you, for someone who has just really embedded in their mind that they are not attractive, like really ingrained that, I'm just like the worst negative self-talk. Like, what would you, as a doctor, from a medical perspective, say to someone who can't get past, like Ross mentioned, he can't get past this concept that he's ugly, and it's blocking him in many ways? Like, I have my own approaches, but I'm curious what yours would be.
Well, let me say, it wouldn't be from a medical perspective because I'm not a medical doctor, so just clarifying that.
Got it.
From a psychological standpoint,
Thank you.
I would actually encourage them to like actually look at like different body types and see what they find attractive. Explore their own areas of interaction. Also, weird as this might sound, like do a Pornhub search for all different body types. You're going to see like a whole array of different bodies out there that people find attractive. You will find videos for people who are over the age of 50. You will find videos for people who have like hairy bodies. You're going to find videos for people who are younger. You're going to find videos for people with really what's classically considered a micro penis, something under 2 inches in length. You're going to find, the gamut of interests if you look for that. And I know this might sound like a weird thing to suggest, but the reality is like it helps to kind of get into the idea of like there's so much variance in what people like sexually, and that like you might find someone who's just like, oh, you are really attracted to me.
Wow.
And I would have never thought like that would be something I would be attracted to.
I think that is a clever idea.
Recognizing our own predispositions and that those don't always have to line up is really important. I remember back in the day when I was like a teenager, there was this song on country radio it's called "She's More." And basically, the singer is talking about like how his picturesque ideal of a woman was that she was going to be super tall and different colored eyes and all this stuff, and then he describes who his wife is, and she's like 5'3" and not anything like what he expected, but she's the person he fell in love with. And that's really, really important to remember. Like your ideal person physically might not necessarily be what you find attractive in other aspects, and that's okay. Right. And vice versa, someone might find you really attractive for a whole bunch of qualities. Your physical appearance might be the last of those things, but there might still be some level of attraction.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of it is us projecting our judgments onto other people, thinking that everybody thinks like we do. And I think that's a huge block. And, it's like just because you think you're attracted to a certain type of people, and if you don't fit what you're attracted to, then you discount yourself as being attractive or someone that, can be sexual with somebody else. It's all about your.
Well, there's this idea of objectification, like this idea of objectification theory, which is that it started off with women, where the idea of like, oh, well, if a woman's expecting a man's interaction, she'll check her body to kind of evaluate how she looks to a male viewer. Gay men do the same thing, and more studies have shown gay men do this as well, which is the idea of like, oh, if I'm expecting to interact with a guy that I might be attracted to or might feel attracted to me, I want to make sure I look good for them. I'm going to expect them to think of me as I might think of them. And therefore we become like double-edged sword, a viewer of our own bodies. We're not only the viewers of what we think we should look like, we're the viewers of what we think someone else should want of us. And then we project that onto ourselves as well. And so there's very interesting dichotomy with all this, where it's like, now I'm looking at myself from what I want for myself, but I'm also looking at myself from what I think other people want from me. And now I'm like purveying my own body to try to figure out what I should do differently.
Right.
None of this helps us psychologically.
And we think we're mind readers, that we know what other people want based on our beliefs. And I think we do this without realizing it, but we're judging other people as being judgmental and having the same judgments that we do. It really is a one big way of mind fuckery where we really can screw ourselves.
Yeah, and for gay men, I think a lot of it too comes down to gay culture. Like there's oftentimes this idea that like, oh, if you're a gym buddy, you need to partner with another gym buddy. And like, I love hearing stories of like the person who is the gym buddy who is really into the polar bear, for instance. And I'm like, that's an awesome pairing. And I love the fact that there's such a difference in their body types and that they found each other attractive, and they found each other attractive possibly because of the body type, but also possibly psychologically they just really are connected to each other. And that's really, really important to kind of recognize.
Absolutely. Yeah. We're not limited to, what we believe, is our one type. And in fact, if we feel like, the person that you're searching for as a sexual partner has to fit a certain shell, like you're really limiting yourself for what's possible, and you're not allowing yourself to actually know what it's like to spend time with someone and feel that deep connection. Because as we started out talking about, to enjoy sex, there's so much more than what's on the outside, dick size or what their body looks like. So much more to a connection than just what's on the outside. And same goes for relationships. It's so important to have that spark. And that's why I had someone in one of our programs ask, so he gave the example that he went on this date with this guy, just felt like such a great connection, felt, just they got along so well. He was really physically attracted to him. They had sex, and then the sex wasn't great. He's like, well, shouldn't I feel that spark? What would you say to him as far as should he
Yes
get
and no. Like, I mean,
sex get better? Like, what would you say?
I would say definitely, yeah. I would say definitely don't necessarily give up on it. I think you have to do a lot of self-assessment. Right. The reality is that for some people, that physical attraction is such a high variance that, yeah, they might need something there. But a lot of times it actually has more to do with kind of like the push-pull dynamic and tension in the relationship. Who's pursuing who initiated, who put some sort of validation on like the positive experience. Those things can be so important into all of this, that part of it, that communication, that psychological connection is so important in terms of like what makes things work well. Right. And the chance to talk about it afterwards, like, oh, okay, that wasn't a fireworks, that wasn't 10. Okay, so it wasn't a 10, it was like a 3.
Yeah.
How can we move it up to something that's closer to a 10? And it might never be a 10, and that can be okay.
Right.
Like recognizing like you may have had sex with people that was way better than the sex that you were ever going to have with your partner. Yeah. But it doesn't mean you are going to necessarily have bad sex with your partner. It just means that you happen to have a better sexual connection with somebody else. But you may not ever wanted to talk to that person ever again, or ever wish that they would be part of your family, or any of those things that are part of partnerships. Yeah. And so recognizing that, and recognizing environment plays a big part of it too. Like if we are really drawn into the idea of like having a hookup at like a bathhouse, for instance, like, and then we get with a partner in their apartment, that might feel very different psychologically for us, arousal standpoint. So those variants are really important to recognize too. And recognizing how, like, what I call kind of like your formula for attraction. Yeah. Is like okay, well, what parts are really important to you? Is it the intellect? Is it the emotional connection? Is it the physical arousal? And recognizing what those elements are, and recognizing what has more weight. Because for some people, it's going to be the psychological piece is so much more important, like that intellect aspect. For some people, it's going to be the emotional aspect, like, ooh, I really need to feel like a strong sense of emotional connection with this person, strong sense of comfort with this person. And for other people, the physical arousal or the physical attraction piece is going to be important. So you have to recognize those. And they all play a role for most people. And there's other variables in it as well, but the 3 paradigms that we've been talking about all play a role. It really is a matter of like, what is the most important piece, what's the secondary, and what's the tertiary thing for you personally, and trying to figure out that piece of it for yourself to know what's going to possibly make things work best for you. I remember working with a couple a while back, and they were talking about how, as I was working with one of the partners one-on-one, we really became clear that one of the reasons that the sex life wasn't working for the couple is that they really, really wanted spontaneity, and the other person in the relationship wasn't into spontaneity. And so we had to kind of explore how can they find a way in the middle to make that work for them.
Right. I just want to make a shout out real quick, just for those watching, because we talked about a lot. Guys, it's so much more than dick size. There's so many different factors. So we've got to like beat it out of our brains that it's all about dick size and boners and erection quality. There's so many more factors. And I also want to talk about something you mentioned that I think is so important, which is communication. And, back to what we were saying about, feeling like all the boxes are checked, but then the sex just wasn't great. Why is it that so many gay men, as easy as it is for us to talk about sex, like with our friends, like it's like almost like we like put on this persona that like we can talk about sex, but then when it comes to talking about sex with someone you're having sex with, why would you say there's such a struggle with, having that level of communication, saying it was a 3 and asking for what you need? Like, what is with that shame or embarrassment, and how can we improve communication? Someone asked a question based on.
We don't have training on it. That's the biggest part of it. Like when we talk about kind of like what is their template growing up, most people don't grow up in households where we talk about sex openly.
Right.
Like, I have a friend, really good friend, love her to death. Her family is really open about sex. I'm like, you all are awesome. You all are rock stars. But most people don't grow up.
Right.
Most people are like, to talk about sex at all, it's more like, you shouldn't have sex until you're married. You shouldn't have sex until you are ready to have procreate. Well, if we're gay and we're not, and we're looking at biological procreation, that's not going to happen. So we don't get used to talking about the things at all.
Yeah. And not only do they not talk about sex, they don't talk about gay sex.
Yeah, exactly. And on top of that, we don't talk about how to communicate with your partner around sex. Even I see this in gay couples, straight couples, lesbian couples, like I see it all across the board. No one wants to talk to their significant other about the sex that they're having.
Right.
They want to use the idea of organic or natural, like it should just happen.
Yeah.
Nothing else in our life just happens, but
Right.
somehow we think sex is supposed to automatically just happen.
Yeah.
No, sex takes work. Relationships take work.
Yeah.
If the guys watching can hear anything from me, it's like relationships take work, sex takes work, and making them last longer and work effectively is the work you're doing.
Absolutely.
None of this comes easy.
And the communication is imperative. It's so important. I mean, I use my relationship with Andrew, for example. I mean, I feel like when we first got together, there was so much that were pulling us together. And, you know, I knew like he was the one for me. But like the sex, like it took some exploring at first. Like it wasn't, you know, a knockout of the park. But as our relationship progressed, so did our level of communication, which is what I would say is the main factor in why our relationship is so successful. And we've taken that level of communication in the bedroom to, you know, what we both like, what we both want, what we both need. You know, someone mentioned, I can't see his name, but that it can be hard to tell your partner that you want more. I found that I didn't want to hurt him asking to be more passionate. Any tips?
Yeah, I think we oftentimes can sometimes stop ourselves from saying things that we feel are going to hurt our significant other, and it might actively hurt them, unfortunately. But we're going to grow stronger and better and be able to have a better relationship if we can talk through and actually move forward on it in a way that works to meet both parties' needs. And it might be that one person is really into like BDSM, for instance, the other person has absolutely no interest. So then you have to explore like, okay, what are ways to get that BDSM need met? That's not going to happen in this partnership because it might just never work. So it might mean that you rely more on porn for that BDSM aspect. If you're a non-monogamous couple, you might decide to utilize the non-monogamy aspect of it and have a BDSM partner that just for that. You might find ways to incorporate it in ways that aren't actively doing BDSM work, but maybe you read erotica to each other, and that might be something that your partner is willing to do. It's thinking outside the box of like, oh, this is my likes, this is your likes. We can't find any compromise. Like sometimes we can, sometimes there are other solutions, creative solutions, and sometimes it's a matter of like, okay, I'm not going to get that need met from this partner, but I've had some really good exploration with the other people I've been with, and I can be okay with that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great advice. Just, you know, we can't predict how people are going to react to anything we say or do. We never know. So, but withholding it, you know, and judging that they're not going to be able to take it, that's a limiting belief. And it can create, you know, when you bottle that up and you're not expressing it and years go by, I mean, it's a missed opportunity, and it can also just drive a wedge in a relationship that could have been talked about.
I so oftentimes hear people say, well, I didn't want to say something because I didn't want to hurt you. And the other partner says, yeah, thank you for like being considerate of not wanting to hurt me, but you hurt me almost by not saying it because I didn't know.
Right.
I didn't know you were needing this. I would have loved to have been given this to you if I could have.
Yes.
And that's a huge factor for a lot of couples. I think when we enter relationships, we do it with the best of intention of like wanting to be connected with somebody. And oftentimes that means we don't want to hurt them. But if we're not asking for things that we need in a relationship, we're not only going to hurt them because they're going to feel like we're omitting things from them, but we're also going to hurt ourselves and ultimately hurt our relationship.
Absolutely. Thanks for sharing that, Chris. I'd like to talk about, I know we mentioned before we went live, discussing, you know, what we're experiencing right now. You know, we're in a state of uncertainty, of chaos with, you know, the lockdown. Some places are opening up, some places aren't, but it's going to be a while before things get back to normal. Yeah. And there's a lot, you know, going on right now and a lot of different perspectives. But I would argue that despite everything going on, now is a time where you absolutely still can have the best sex of your life during physical distancing. And I'm curious what your take on that would be.
Yeah, I think we were talking about this a little bit too. I think one of the best things we can do is just really utilize this time as a sense of exploration of what our own interests are. Because when we have a better understanding of what we like sexually, whether that is through masturbation or reading erotica or watching porn, like when we get it, or doing research on fetishes, like when we have a clear sense of what we like, we can bring that to the table with our significant other, and that will make things better for us. So the reality is like, oh, okay, if I've been really interested in learning more about pegging, for instance, and usually we think about it like a heterosexual practice, like a heterosexual female and a male, but two men can do pegging as well. So like,
Can you
So
what pegging is?
for those who don't know, pegging is when typically a cisgendered female will put a strap-on dildo on and use that on her male partner, presumed cis partner. Not always cisgender people, not always heterosexual people, but that's the general idea. But gay men can participate in pegging too. You can utilize a strap-on and use that on your partner, and sometimes that might actually work for people who are experiencing erectile difficulties, for instance.
Right.
Like if the one partner is typically a top and the other partner is a bottom, and the person who's at the bottom really wants to be fucked and the other person can't because they're just not having good erectile quality, they can use a strap-on in place of that. Or there's actually a particular type of strap-on where you can actually put your penis into the actual dildo as well. So that can actually be kind of self-empowering a little bit as well. And so that's another way of kind of exploring kind of like and creating a better sex life in a relationship. Like it's problem solving ultimately.
What about
and when we're I was actually just about to say that. So also like when we are kind of quarantined and we're locked away, being able to use virtual technology is a really important variable. So like whether that is we use like a cam program like Skype, or we use or we do video messages. I know there's a great app called Marco Polo that you can like send like cool little video message to, but you can also send a sexy message to a significant other that way. You can use things like Chatterbait and things like that, where you're virtually platforming with random people coming through. And the other really, really cool thing that's kind of continuing to develop and get better with time are apps that you can control remotely. So like you can have a dildo that your significant other has their phone, and they can control everything on their phone, and you can get off with your partner while they're controlling that. And there's actually some really cool VR technology where like you can actually have essentially virtual sex using toys, and that can be done in a way that is really, really fun. Some of the VR technology works regardless of distance, and some of it has like limitations on it, but that's another great way of adding a little spice to it. And utilizing this to kind of go back to old school times too, if you're like stuck away from your significant other, like some people, their significant other lives hundreds of miles away. Like you can sometimes do this as more like, okay, we're going to send sexy little messages to each other, like via email or written letters or sexy little pictures, like go back old school a little bit. Can be a really kind of useful tool to kind of increase our sexual engagement with a significant other.
I love that. Yeah. It's a time where we can get creative. We can explore outside the box, but we can view anything as a limitation or an opportunity, and this is an opportunity to try new things, to get creative. I love how you said, really tune in with yourself, explore maybe what you might desire that you haven't really tapped into, and just really be able to explore that. So thank you.
And as we were talking about before, like guys get so locked into their like idea of like the penis is the center of my world. Like utilize this time to figure out what other parts of your body are like erogenous zones to you. You might find like, oh, hey, I didn't know that if I touch a feather onto my neck, all of a sudden I'm like on pins and needles, and this is amazing. So I think kind of recognizing that as well and trying to explore that, I think could be really useful during this time.
Yeah. Someone just commented, a lot of guys are wondering, how do I even find a guy to put into practice all of this?
So it's a little bit more challenging, admittedly, when we are looking at times like this in COVID. I think obviously there are the apps, things like Scruff, Grindr, etc. There are definitely message boards out there for those who don't know. Like there are message boards that you can go on to look for folks. There are subgroups in Reddit. There are groups through Facebook, etc.
Yeah,
Facebook's a great option. Meetups are a great option. You can use like the Meetup app to like message people. So like if you know really interested in hiking, you might find that hiking group. Maybe you all can't do hiking right now, but you can message with somebody and like converse with them and figure out like ways and plans that you might want to do once COVID kind of reduces down. So I think that's definitely ways to kind of explore it.
Yeah, lots of opportunities. Absolutely. Yeah, and I know you have to run in about 15 minutes. So I know you guys typed hordes of questions that you want Dr. Chris to answer. So I'm going to ask him a few. And of course, there were many questions about, how do I get it more often? We'll just skip that one. But a lot of questions about how to improve your sex drive and erection quality. Before sex, like right before, I heard a lot of guys mentioning that I can get a great boner, but then right before I stick it in or put it in whatever, or do whatever with it, I lose it immediately. Or during sex, erection quality. I'm curious how you would address that.
Couple things. I mean, first off, I would like when anyone ever comes in with erectile difficulty, I almost always encourage them to get a complete workup, meaning like go to your primary care doctor or an endocrinologist, make sure your testosterone levels are normative, make sure your blood functioning and blood panels are normative, your vitamin levels are normative. Because if those things are out of whack, that could be part of it, you know. Sometimes and the unfortunate thing is sometimes you will have someone who have testosterone level that falls within the normative range, but it's at the lower end of normative, and that's still going to end up negatively impacting someo's ability to get erection. But testosterone is not the only thing. It's just one variable. Things such as like vitamin D are a variable as well. And so we have to recognize all those things. What we really have to get into, if we're already starting to have, like if we have an erection and we are about to start penetration and we haven't started it and we lose our erection, it's kind of figuring out like, okay, well, what about this moment is really causing me a level of psychological distress, which is probably losing the erectile functioning. And that might mean that we're worried about penis size. It might be that we're worried that we're not going to be a good top. It might be that we're worried about like anal sex and the messiness of it. Like these things can all be variables in it. So kind of assessing for yourself. If it is a matter of you started having anal sex, if you've already had the erection, start having anal sex, you start losing erection, look at kind of the positions you're doing, because that can actually be a variable. Our blood flow can fluctuate if we're in different positions. So like if you're in a certain position, you're not going to have as good of erectile functioning as you might if you're in a different position. And like, so I've had some clients who like, if they are trying to do like a traditional missionary, it doesn't work for them. But if they are sitting, like lying back and they're sitting on them, that actually works really well for them. And it has to do somewhat with our relaxed state of being, our own kind of stress around like what positions we're in, what kind of body awareness we're having. All these aspects. So it sounds like there's a lot of different possibilities. You know, one could be like a chemical, you know, physiological factor. But you mentioned before, like most of the time, like what is going to outweigh that would probably be some sort of thought process, some sort of belief system, some sort of mental block that's causing you to think, oh, he made a weird face. Oh, he's not liking it. Oh, it's not working anymore. Yeah, definitely. Like we can get into our head in the moment. I think some of the best sexual experiences are ones where we can have like playfulness and just relaxed aspect of it. And a lot of times we don't get that when we're having like a first time like casual encounter. But hopefully over time when we're with a significant other, the more we can add playfulness and relaxed aspect of kind of sexual engagement, that's actually going to usually promote relaxed sex. And sometimes it literally it's funny that now, like the position sometimes is the factor. Like some people's penises just don't have as much bendability as another person's penis, and like that kills it. Like, you know, you have some guys who like, if this is like their penis and this is their pelvis, like some guys like, oop, that's all I can do, and other guys are like, doop, 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 and like, do that again. Very like, doop, doop, doop. Like obviously that's a little extreme, but like the reality is that like, for some people, like that is a factor. Like you bend my penis too far in one direction and it ain't gonna happen. Like I'm gonna lose my erection immediately just because it's just painful. Well, that's great. There's lots of things to try, you know, lots of possibilities. Positioning, you know, really checking in with yourself. Are you able to relax and actually be present and enjoy? Because that's one thing that I talk a lot about is, you know, when we're in our heads, like the blood's not flowing to our dick head, you know, it's a silly way of saying it, but it's true. If we're not able to relax and be present and in the moment, then you know, we really don't even know like what we're experiencing, and it can have a huge impact. And so big, you know, factors as far as mental versus physiological versus trying out different positions. You know, just being open to having discussions. Hey, honey, let's try this, or hey, I forgot your name, but let's try this. Being silly, but either case is okay. So, and that could be it. Like we might have forgotten the person's name, and we're like, oh, God, what is their name? What is their name? What is their name? Oh, that's happened to me before. I'm not gonna lie. So and I know I want to quickly just kind of have you, if you can, quickly just talk about Tantra and tantric sex. It seems to be it's not an area that like I'm not an expert of it, but the idea behind it is really slowing down the process, getting yourself comfortable with another person's body, getting connected with their body, understanding your own body awareness, really paying attention to things like breathing. I would argue that like in some ways Tantra is kind of like yoga and mindfulness meet sex. And so like that's kind of the basic framework of it. You can find people who are great practitioners of it. I know that for those who like Davey Wavy, he has his own like porn site, which is hemorrhoidtv.com, I think, and they have like videos on actual tantric sex there. One of the people there that they're connected with does tantric videos and kind of explains what it is in more detail. So that's a great resource for people who really want to see an actual video of it as well. The basic framework is you're getting body awareness, breath awareness, connection with the other person. That energetic attraction piece of it is there.
Yeah.
That's all part of it.
Cool. Thanks, Dr. Chris. And another really great question from Dominique asks, when it comes to sexual roles, top, bottom, verse, frauding, when one position seems more finite than simply preferred, is it something that's more physical or physiological or psychological? Physical or psychological?
It can be both. So it can be that we are literally locked into the mindset like, oh, I am a top, that is my role. Or it could be a physical thing, meaning like, oh, I literally lose my erection every single time I try to top. I just don't really enjoy topping. From a physical standpoint, it doesn't do anything for me. And so both can definitely be true. It really depends. And I usually encourage folks to try both sides of things. Try topping, try bottoming, try side activity, see what works for you. Some of it is psychological and some of it is physiological. And if you're really experiencing a really painful intercourse and at the bottom, like receptive partner, like recognize that you might actually have like a tight pelvic floor, and that can be a variable there. So like even if you don't enjoy bottoming, it shouldn't be excruciatingly painful. So like if you are experiencing that, it's quite likely that you have a tight pelvic floor that could be causing pain.
Oh, thanks for answering. That was actually going to be my next question. If bottoming really hurts, how could someone get used to it? Is there any secrets to actually?
Yeah, I think first off, it's just paying attention to your own body awareness and recognizing, okay, am I really clenching up right now? Because if that's the case, then that might be the variable. But there are other things you can do. You can play with your own bottom yourself, whether that's using fingers, you can use dildos on yourself. A really good practice is actually working your way up to a size that's comparable to a partner. So like you are in a long-term partnership, you start out with a really small butt plug, something really small, and you move to the next one, till you find one that's similar to your partner in size. A great option, like if you really want to get up to that point where you're working up to your significant other side, you can do a clone a willy and like get a mold that's very similar to your partner's penis. And that will be a great way to work up, because unfortunately what happens oftentimes with the clone a willy is your mold ends up being slightly smaller than your actual penis, because it's really hard to keep the erectile functioning going when your dick is in cold plaster mold. So for that reason, it tends to shrink down a little bit. So like that's a great way to kind of segue into like, oh, here's one that's like 90% of my significant other. So great, now I can actually get up to the actual significant other.
What is that called again? Because it sounds like
it's called a clone a willy.
Sounds like a great Christmas gift.
Yeah.
Or Hanukkah.
And the other thing too is figuring out what lubes work for you. Like, so I actually am a big proponent of like silicone lube or hybrid-based lubes because they last longer. Water-based lubes tend to dry up pretty quick. Spit is a bad lube. For anyone who's using spit, stop using spit, invest in lube. It costs $10 to get a small bottle. It's not that big of an investment. And you're going to have a much better sexual experience that way.
Yeah. And since we're on the topic of butt sex, which is a topic, I noticed there were a lot of questions about douching. Just wondering if you had any.
Douching is a bad idea. You don't want to douche at all. Douches themselves, like actual chemical douches, are really bad for the body's natural flora. If you want to do anything, you can use a gentle saline, or you can use a water-based enema. Either one of those can be used. But in general, even with that, we're going to recommend that you do that very minimally and not a lot, because the reality is that does actually impact the rectum, and it can actually lead to bleeding if you're doing too much. Like, it can be really dangerous over time if you're using it like every single day. Like, obviously, like once a week is not gonna be a problem, but like if you're doing it like 7 times in a week, you're probably gonna notice some irritation. You're probably gonna notice just them not so comfortable.
Yeah, and any other tips for cleanliness?
I think the big thing is just really making sure that you are cleaning your rectum relatively regularly when you shower. Like, obviously use a washcloth and some soap. That can all be used on the external portions of your body. And don't be too vigorous when doing scrubbing, because you can actually like hurt yourself, but like do a nice little scrub. And that's really, and making sure you're eating vegetables and you're having good bowel movements. As gross and non-sexy as that is, the reality is that like that's a big part of it. If you are feeling constipated on a regular basis, you're not going to feel very good if you are having anal sex and being alone.
Right. Got it. So yeah. So just overall cleanliness. Any inside cleaning needs to be done there.
Yeah, you can do a little bit with a finger, or like a finger and a like a cotton cloth, or even just like tissue, or even like a baby wipe will all be fine. But again, you're not going to want to go super deep in there, and you're not going to want to have sharp nails. That's a bad idea. So yeah, just be very kind of cautious. But
yeah, one thing that I've learned is just a quick finger test before, like to see what's going to come on the dick. If you're bugging.
And recognize shit happens. The reality is, it's anal sex. Like,
it's gonna
happen. There's gonna be times when someone's gonna pull out, and there's gonna be a little spotting.
Yep,
it's gonna happen.
Yep, absolutely. And it's just we're not all porn stars, and they have a lot of precautions before they hit record.
Exactly.
Yeah. Another question, really interesting, and I'm curious about this one. Does anything actually increase semen volume that you know of?
There are a lot of myths around it. I've never read any actual research articles that say you eat XYZ and you're going to have more semen volume. The reality is, some of it is genetic predisposition. Some of it is a little bit like, how long has it been since you last ejaculated? So those things are variables, but like there's not like a direct formula, like take this vitamin or take this and that's going to create it.
Right.
It's more like the amount of time it's been since you last ejaculated, and potentially some variables of food.
Got it. That's good to know. There's no magic fruit or pill that can just make you come more. Okay, cool. Good to know. Yeah. And also basic practices besides condoms to keep STIs away.
So basic practices, I mean, obviously condoms are the gold standard. Using PrEP is a great thing if you're trying to help reduce your risk of HIV. But other things you can do are increase your lubrication that you're using. That will help decrease chance of micro tears, limiting obviously the number of sexual partners you have.
Again, and more.
So if you have more lube, you're going to have less chances of having what's called micro tears, little tears in the rectum lining. Those little tears can lead to bleeding. That bleeding can lead to HIV transmission. So the chances of like getting HIV are going to be lessened. Again, not minimized, not completely gone, but like lessened if you are using more lubrication, because there's going to be less friction there. Other things you can do are, if you're going to use a condom and want to have it more sensitive, you put just a drop or two of lube at the very end of the tip of the condom. That's going to help the penis feel more sensation when you're having anal sex.
Wow, that's so helpful. Wow. I wish we had another hour to just go through more questions. Like rapid, amazing. Yeah. My mind is blown. So this is awesome. Yeah, Chris, we're definitely gonna have to have you again soon. I think we should at least do a monthly thing.
Good.
But I saw some other questions. It really deals with what we talked about before, as far as dealing with performance anxiety. It's just gonna be just really doing some work to really transform those limiting beliefs.
And I would really encourage folks to, like, if you're really noticing a constant struggle, like, seek out a sex therapist, someone who can help you break down the psychological aspect of it, help you break down the anxiety patterns, because that's what we're trained to do. And that's going to be able to help you get through that issue in a better way.
Yeah. And how would someone get in touch with you if they want?
So they can get in touch with me by going through chriswilsonphd.com. You can find me on the first website, which is PHIIRST.com, or stands for Philadelphia Institute for Individual Relational and Sex Therapy, long name. And you can also find me through the ASECT, or the American Association of Sexual Educators, Counselors, and Therapists website directory as well. And you can find other ASECT certified sex therapists through the directory as well.
Awesome. Well, Chris, thank you so much for joining me today. I know you have to run.
Thank you.
But always a pleasure having you on. I just love picking your brain, and because it's like the work we do is very different, but there's a lot of commonalities as far as really helping people overcome mindset blocks and limiting beliefs, which is at the root of a lot of dysfunction. And I love that we have different strategies and techniques and tools to be able to help, gay men, who is particularly who I serve, be able to overcome these blocks. And guys, if you got anything out of this, I want you to know that the beliefs that you're telling yourself, the stories you're telling yourself about your body or your dick or your sexual performance abilities, erection qualities, if you're telling yourself it's not good enough, that's really going to be a big part in what you continue to attract, what you continue to, to find, because those can be very self-fulfilling prophecies. And I want to encourage you to think about stepping outside of the box, breaking out of that comfort zone, and reaching out to Chris or myself. you know, if you want to be able to overcome those barriers, because I've seen it done time and time again. And I know that, Chris, you've had amazing success with the work that you do. So thank you so much, my brother, for being here. Always a joy. And yeah.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, absolutely. We'll definitely have you back again real soon.
All right. Sounds good. Take care.
Bye for now.